asked me to speak about sustainable farming and ranching in a hotter, drier climate. And trust me, no matter where you're at practically, there is a hotter and drier climate than yours. And I'm convinced it can be done and done profitably. The amount of moisture one receives is irrelevant. Do you believe that or not?
No. I think so.
It is true. What is relevant is the amount of effective moisture one receives. And there's a huge difference. Let me give you an example of that. I was speaking down in Arkansas, and I got there the night before, and I found out they're in an area they get 54 inches of rainfall per year, and they're applying 50 inches of irrigated water on top of that to get 170 bushel corn. And I stood there the next day, I found that out, so I ran all the calculations, found out their water use efficiency for corn, and I know what mine is. Mine's 8.11 bushels of corn per inch of water I get. So I stood up there the next day and told them, they're using over 100 inches of moisture. I said, you should be growing 825 bushel corn. The problem isn't the moisture, the problem is they're not infiltrating the moisture they do get. Effective rainfall is the amount that can be infiltrated and stored. One must capture every raindrop where it falls. That's imperative. You got to be able to infiltrate it and then store it. And as I said this morning, the way to do that is by following these principles of nature. And I know I went over those this morning. I'm going to expand on them a little bit, but they just work anywhere. Anywhere in the world where there's production agriculture, these principles will work. So number one, least amount of disturbance possible. That doesn't only mean mechanical, it means chemical also. And I showed this photo this morning, but it's worth showing over and over and over again because that is the same soil. That's what mechanical tillage will do to a soil over time, excess mechanical tillage. And then it destroys the pore spaces also, and it's those pore spaces that are critical for water infiltration. You have to have them. Now, I get asked all the time is how long is it going to take to regenerate soils? This picture here is just striking. There's a young producer from western Kansas, Drier area of Kansas, who, to his father's credit, a number of years ago, Michael was his name, he came and listened to Ray Archuleta and I speak, went home to his father and he said, Dad, I want to try this. And they were conventional tillage, typical dryland Kansas wheat farm. To his father's credit, his father said, okay, Michael, I will let you try that on part of the acres. That's the difference in 3 years. Diversity, cover crops, integrated livestock, same soil, 3 years. His father went to him and said, we're switching the whole farm. They're now 100% zero-till, diversity and covers. But which of those soils is going to infiltrate more water? Which is going to hold more water? Which has more soil biology in it? Because which has more carbon in it? Plain and simple to see. That, to me, is one of the most striking examples of what regenerative ag can do. Michael Thompson now is traveling all over speaking about it. Pore spaces are essential for water infiltration. Soil should look like that. Yeah, Gabe, but you don't understand. Our soils don't look like that. You need to understand what makes soils like that. What makes soils become that well aggregated. Tillage destroys soil structure. Again, I understand, I'm talking about some organic producers, I understand you're going to till. That's okay, let's just minimize the tillage passes as much as possible. What tillage will do is, and I showed it in the slides of the 4 producers this morning, it'll put that crust on the soil surface. If you have that crust, tillage does more than that, but that crust as a result of tillage, you're not going to be able to infiltrate water. Then you have a dysfunctional water cycle and a dysfunctional soil ecosystem. Many of you have seen these slides because I use them often. I'm surprised my neighbor, if he ever watches one of my videos, he's going to see. But to me, this is a definition of stupidity. I've been on this place for 35 years. Every fall he goes and tills that low spot. Every year he'll get the crop planted, we'll get an inch of rain, and that'll happen. That's actually after a half of an inch rainfall event. He's sealing the pore space, destroyed the soil, he destroyed the pore spaces, it seals the surface, he can't infiltrate water. This is a photo I took off the front deck of my house, June 15, 2009. They were calling for a major rainfall event. Started raining at about 5:30 in the evening. By 12 midnight, we'd had 12.2 inches. We ended up with 13.6 inches in 22 hours. Jay Fear, who was the district conservationist at the time in our county, came out the next morning and he took these photos. That's my farmstead in the background. It doesn't look like there's much slope there, and there's not much slope compared to the mountains around here, but there is slope there. Now I'm a bit embarrassed, there's some bare soil here, but that doesn't look too bad for 13.6 inches of rain. Jay dug down in the field, and that's the photo he took. And he makes the statement, he tells many people, you could have went into that field, drove a pickup across it, a tractor, anything, and you wouldn't have made ruts after 13.6 inches of rain. That's why I make the statement, doesn't matter the rainfall you get, it's how much is effective. How much can you infiltrate, move throughout the soil profile, and then via the organic matter, store it for when you need it. Now, I told you this morning when we bought the place in '91, we could infiltrate a half of an inch of rainfall per hour on the cropland. We could infiltrate more than that on our rangeland, but not on the cropland. Team of scientists I had 2 years ago, here's how long it now takes me to infiltrate an inch of water.
Oh, wow.
The answer is 9 seconds. We can infiltrate the second inch in 16 seconds. So I went from a half of an inch an hour to 2 inches in 25 seconds. Now I'm not going to say I can do that over every acre on our entire 5,000 acre operation, but we can come close. We can easily infiltrate 15 inches an hour over most of the acres on our operation. So you can change it, and that's how you increase your effective rainfall. Second principle.
Any saturation point on that?
It eventually will. It'll eventually saturate. Realize my environment, I get about 10 to 11 inches of rainfall per year and another 5 inches of moisture from the snow. We typically get about 75 inches of snow. Equates to about 5 inches of water. So that's 15 to 16 inches of total precip. I've never seen it rain that much in an hour. So I feel confident we're going to be able to infiltrate and capture every raindrop where it falls. An important thing on doing that, though, is you have to have armor on the soil. You have to have that soil covered. Ray Archuleta put this slide together, and I really like it, so I stole it from him. He titled it, "This soil is naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever." Think about it. There's nothing protecting that soil. Wind erosion, water erosion. It's thirsty because the moisture is evaporating off it. In environments like ours, Montana, North Dakota, you better be able to hold on to your moisture. You know, I was in Australia here last fall, and they will actually evaporate down to a meter deep in the soil. It's not uncommon for soil temps there to reach 150 plus degrees. If you don't have armor on the soil, what's that doing to all your soil biology, everything else? This is the difference just between under some armor and bare soil. There's 25 degrees approximately difference in soil temp. I had a tour at our place one day, and we were talking about soil temps. So air temperature was in the low 90s. Underneath the residue, it was 87 degrees. Bare soil was 107. That's 20 degrees. You might not think that matters, but it matters when you get into the hot times of year. It matters significantly to the amount of evaporation, transpiration. This was a photo we took that same day, and then, oh, I don't have it in there, but if you brush that residue aside, there's a lot of earthworms there still working. Here's why soil temps are so important. Start at the bottom. At 70 degrees soil temp, that plant is taking 100% of the moisture, putting it towards growth. As your soil temps rise, that plant starts shutting down. When you get up near 100-degree soil temp, that plant's basically shut off, and it's not going to grow. If you don't have a growing plant, you're not cycling carbon, you're not going to put money in your pocket. So we need to keep soil temps at a respectable level. Now, once you start getting significantly higher than that, you're losing it all through evaporation. You get up to 140 degrees, you're killing soil life. I'm on many, many farms and ranches every year where soil temps are 140 plus degrees. It's common, you know. Just take a thermometer and test it yourself on your operation. You'll be surprised. And when we start understanding how soil ecosystem function, it becomes imperative that we pay attention to armor on the soil surface. Here's the photo I was going to show. That was that same day. You brush aside the residue. We got all these earthworms there working for us. And they're working for free. All I got to do is provide them the home and habitat, and they're putting all those infiltration pores in, plus they're cycling nutrients through. Brush aside the residue of the cover crop. I suppose that's a little hard to see from the back, but that's solid earthworm castings. I tell people when my wife and I bought that operation, we could never go fishing because you'd never find an earthworm. And now, you know, we have earthworms like that throughout the growing season. That's a tool that can be used, that it's not costing us anything, it's just a benefit. Why not take advantage of it? Your question?
Did you bring any worms in?
Did I bring anything in? I have brought nothing into that operation as far as biology. Same with dung beetles. You know, when we were in the conventional model for many years, using porons, wormers, xanthaminthics on the cattle. We quit those in 2008. It took us 2 years to see our first dung beetle. Now we have 17 species of dung beetles we've recorded on that place. Build it and they will come. Simple as that. Third principle is diversity. I'm going to show you a series of slides here. Some of you have probably seen them, but these slides have gone all over the world. This, more than anything else, taught me the power of diversity. In 2006, I had the opportunity to go to No-Till on the Plains and listen to this man, Dr. Ademir Caligari. In my mind, he's the world's foremost authority on cover crops. He's worked in over 60 countries all over the world. He said two things that day that really stuck with me. He said, you give me 2 inches of precipitation a year, 200 inches, anywhere in between, I'll grow you a cover crop. Now, I was already growing covers at that time. I was mixing 2- and 3-way species in combination, and people thought I was nuts. But Dr. Caligari said, cover crops are meant to be seeded in multi-species combinations. And I'll never forget when he said that. I hit myself on the head and I went, Gabe, you idiot. That's how nature functions. That's how a native prairie is. Why am I only using 2- and 3-way species? So at that time, I was on the board of supervisors for the Burleigh County Soil Conservation District, and we had some plot land located a mile south of my ranch. We decided we'd test what he told us, and we were going to plant cover crops as monocultures and then as a diverse polyculture mix. Now, the winter of 05-06 was very dry. There wasn't much snow. So we seeded in May into real dry soil. At the end of July, we had only received 1 inch of precipitation. And that's about what you'd expect of turnips for 1 inch of precip. Next plot was radishes, same thing. On down the line we went until we got to the diverse polyculture. Explain that. Our agronomists tell us, oh, you got to keep this weed-free field and you got to plant a monoculture. Really? Is that how nature functions? No, that's not how nature functions. The staff there at the Conservation District clipped all the above ground biomass. We over tripled production where we had the diverse mixes. Dr. Chris Nichols, who's a soil ecologist, explained it this way, and she's talking about mycorrhizal fungi. Not only do the fungi provide for the needs of one plant, but that fungal hyphae pipeline connect to multiple plants, thus supplying the nutrient and energy needs for multiple plants. That's what happens in nature. You know, if you really want to watch some neat videos, Google Dr. Jack Schultz. He's a researcher at the University of Missouri. Dr. Schultz specializes in plant communication. And I've seen videos of his where they will introduce a soybean pest into one corner of a field, and within 10 minutes, the far corner of the field, those plants are sending off chemicals to attract predator insects to take care of that pest, all the way across the field. How do those plants know that? They communicate through mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi is the streets and avenues of the soil, and we're not taking advantage of that. I laugh today at all the latest gadgets out there on exact fertilizer placement and all this stuff. I don't need to do any of that. My fungi will move the nutrients throughout whatever area I have. Dr. Christine Jones from Australia is one of the world's foremost authorities on mycorrhizal fungi, and she says it's not uncommon for single fungi to cover 1,000 to 2,000 acres. So what are we worried about placing fertilizer exactly and all this for, when all we got to do is provide the home for the fungi and not kill them off with tillage and synthetics, and they'll do that job for us. Now, I was in Canada a year ago, and they're working on some interesting things. This is a triticale field. Looks pretty pathetic, right? You see it's headed out. They aren't going to get much yield there. This field looks a lot better, right? Look at how large those triticale heads are. The amazing thing is they're side by side, planted the same day. The only difference, one's a monoculture, one's a polyculture. And yet, here we are growing our crops as monocultures. Does it make sense? Is that how nature functions? There's no fertilizer, no foliars, no amendments of any kind. The only difference is the amount of species in the mix. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? The lady in pink here, that's Dr. Yamili. She was in charge of that demonstration there up in Alberta. And I tell you what, if that doesn't open some eyes. So now you see why I'm trying to grow cash crops and multi-species combinations. In Canada up here, there's a group of young producers that's doing some amazing things with polyculture cash crops, where they're growing them in combination, because monocultures are a detriment to soil health. Why are we doing that? Now they're growing three-way combinations. They grow barley, canola, and peas together. They're separating them as fast as they combine them, right before they're put in the bins. So this year on our place, we grew a combination of barley, oats, flax, peas, and lentils. 5-species mix mixed together, and it actually did real well. Do you have a question? Do you have something? Question?
How do you separate lentils from?
Yeah, lentils are what you're going to do when you're going to grow the polyculture mixes is you make sure the seeds are different size. In my case, they're not meant to be separated. I'm growing them as a feed for the hogs and as a cover crop mix. So I will just take the weed seeds and chaff out, and I'll market it as a cover crop blend. You got to think outside the box. Yes?
So you could clean it though, right?
I could clean it, and they are cleaning. Peas, lentils, and barley are easily separated. That isn't a problem at all. And I've been growing peas and oats, peas and barley together, triticale vetch together, rye vetch for many years, but I need to take it up a notch. Those young producers, they're challenging me, and I love it. You know, it just makes sense. It's the diversity that drives soil health. That's one of the important components in a healthy soil ecosystem. We have to focus on that. And it's the root mass that really builds organic matter. 2/3 of you, approximately, of your organic matter increase will come from roots. So we have to get those very, very fibrous, diverse roots into the soil to build organic matter. Okay, the next question I'm going to ask is, what's most important to a new plant starting out? Is it nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium? What is it? Any guesses?
Phosphorus.
Phosphorus. Heard one person say. What will your agronomist tell you? Whatever he's got to sell you, right? This is Dr. David Johnson. Dr. Johnson is actually in the engineering department at New Mexico State University. He has come up with, he set out to find the answer to just that. Now, in order to have real correlation, you need a coefficient factor of about 0.7. So he studied nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, organic matter. Nitrogen, 0.001. In other words, a new seedling could care less if there's nitrogen in the soil. Phosphorus, 0.041, not much. Potassium, 0.003. Organic matter, 0.122. Little bit, but not much. Certainly not meaningful statistically. Fungal bacterial ratio. 0.04 in the upper left, these are all pepper plants, seeded the same day. 3.68 in the lower right. In other words, the higher the fungal component of your soil, the better it is for the plant. Okay, does that make sense? Yet look at our soils in the northern Great Plains. Unless you're in the mountains in a forested area, highly, highly bacterial. It's very common for me to work with a producer and see something like this. Those two red arrows, the one on the left is pointing to bacteria, the one on the right, fungal. 2,240 bacteria to 205 fungal. 10 to 1 the other direction, the wrong direction. That's common of most soils under a conventional production model or a model with tillage. That's very common because when we till a field, we're going to have an influx of bacteria. So we're throwing off the fungal to bacterial ratio. When we use synthetics, we're going to feed that, we're going to increase bacteria, lower the fungal component. This is back in 05, but this was my fungal to bacterial. 405 to 274. I'm still not 1-to-1, but I'm awfully close, you know? This is one of the reasons Gabe doesn't need to use synthetic fertilizer. We've got the fungal component in our soil to get those plants up and started. Question,
On that
Patti.
other one, so if you're consultant for a producer, how are you going to get him to get the fungal back?
Okay, that's a great question, Patti. How do we get the fungal bacterial up? A, we got to reduce synthetics, we got to reduce tillage, and we have to grow things. We have to grow biomass to get the fungal component up. So that means cover crops. This is ways to increase mycorrhizal fungi. And these are universal no matter where we're at. Reduce or eliminate chemicals, tillage, synthetic fertilizers, and then a living plant cover in the ground as long as possible. Mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relationships with the roots of plants. They need them as a host in order to live. The plant pumps carbon into the soil. The fungi feed off that carbon, and in return, they transport nutrients and water to the plants. That's how soils evolved over eons of time. So what I do when I work with producers or on my own operation, when I take over a new piece of land, we go in and plant mycorrhizal friendly species. And no matter how degraded a soil is, there's going to be somewhere near where there's a road ditch, a fence line, something will have some mycorrhizal fungi. Now, there's many companies out there now who will try and sell you mycorrhizal fungi. I would say you can try them, but buyer beware. Buyer beware. That Right now, they're just learning a lot about mycorrhizal fungi. So to propagate the right species for your environment, if you're going to go buy some of that, just try it and do a trial. This is just some land I purchased, and we went in and planted a cover crop made up of those species that are compatible to mycorrhizal fungi. Now, many of us as producers, we're told by our agronomists that, hey, corn is mycorrhizal friendly, wheat is mycorrhizal friendly. One of the things that's really being found out right now is that many of the quote-unquote new improved species of our grains are no longer compatible with mycorrhizal fungi. They focus strictly on yield and they forgot to look at the roots. And so now, the best estimates I've heard that are over 50% of the corn varieties used today are non-mycorrhizal. Wheat is similar to that. And the only way you find that out is by testing, and there's very few labs that do it. There's a lab in South Georgia that does it. That's one of the reasons on our own operation, we have most of what we're growing as far as cash crops, we've bred up on our own operation over the past 20 years. And I'm 100% confident that they work on my soils. I think that's a lost art. I think we need to get back to it. We need to start growing and raising our own genetics for our own operations. So I showed this morning, so I'll just go through it briefly. All 4 crop types, grow some of each. And then not monocultures. Now I'm not going to stand here and say I never grow a monoculture. If I'm propagating a certain variety that I want, I may grow it as a monoculture, but you can bet I'm going to have a cover crop either before that or right after that monoculture cash crop. This is our average yield per acre of corn. That is my cost to produce a bushel of corn. Over the past 9 years, I took all of my income and expenses for the past 9 years, and I've got it broke down by all the different crop types. I don't think I put that in this presentation. All I'm trying to show you here, I'm not bragging about how low my corn, my cost is to grow a bushel, but when corn's down to under $3 a bushel, I can still make money, whereas most people can't. One of the easiest ways to move into cover crops, yes, question.
I saw you had herbicides there, Gabe.
I saw I had herbicide. That is because, and you'll notice on this one the seed cost is much higher. That's because this is the total over 9 years. And we do occasionally use a herbicide pass. It's not post-emergent. I'm never going to say never, but I haven't used a post-emergent herbicide in years. We're using a burn down, not glyphosate. But we're either using shadow for grasses, gramoxone, something like that. You know, if I don't have enough cover, and I'm going to get a flush of weeds, we'll go in. Or if I have a cover crop growing, I want to terminate so I can plant the cash crop, that's where I'll use the herbicide. So over a 9-year period, that's what it's averaged out. Now my corn cost is now much, much lower than that per acre for seed because I'm using my own seed. I'm using open pollinated variety that I've bred up on my place over the past years. Winter triticale, hairy vetch, rye hairy vetch. To me, this is a slam dunk no-brainer in a northern environment. I have never ever had my hairy vetch winter kill. I'm using seed that I've propagated over the past 23 years because this originated from the seed I first bought back in 1994. This is my most profitable cash crop year in and year out over the past 9 years. My average net profit per acre is $915. Because hairy vetch seed's expensive, I'm combining them together and I'm selling it as a blend. And it works out really, really well for me. Oats is another one that I grow. You know, not a lot of people grow oats anymore, some do. Our philosophy on our place is people laugh at us because we're different. We laugh at them because they're all the same, right? I'm going to do things that other people aren't in order to take advantage of it. So oats is one thing I can grow real well in my soils. It's mycorrhizal friendly. The variety I'm using is just keeping my own seed year after year after year. And everybody says, oh, you're going to get diseases and pests. Really? There's 3 types of clover growing in there, which allows us, you'll notice on the left over there, a grazing income. We're able to go in there with decent stock densities in the fall of the year and graze off that clover. And that adds considerable amount of money to our bottom line. We're selling most all this oats as seed. So it's being used as seed in some of the cover crop blends. We grow cash crops on about 80 to 90% of our cropland acres every year. We have about 2,000 cropland acres. We're going to grow cash crops 80 to 90% of them. However, along with that, we're going to grow a cover crop, either before the cash crop, along with it, or in the case of fall biennials after it. Too many people in our northern environment think they can take off a wheat crop, spring wheat crop, and then plant a cover crop. You're not going to get much growth. You're better off going with a fall biennial then. Now, what do we do with the remaining 15 to 20%? Full season cover crops. And by that I mean we'll take like that rye hairy vetch, winter triticale hairy vetch, we'll graze it off or we'll combine it, then we'll come in with a warm season cover crop mix. Predominantly brown midrib sorghum sudan along with cowpeas, mung beans, guar, a forage brassica, etc. We'll allow that to grow, and then that's what we'll either feed our grass finishers or we'll run our cow-calf pairs on in the winter. I know of one young producer in Canada who has gone to a system now where he's 2 full years of cover crops, grazing it with livestock, then a year of organic cash grain production. He said he's making way more money than he ever has because he doesn't put any inputs besides the seed into that cash grain crop. He enjoys livestock, has more livestock than grain farming, but he says the two work really well together because the 2 years of cover is supplying the carbon to fuel a very high yielding cash crop. Fourth principle is living root as long as possible. Never pass up the opportunity to cycle carbon. You know, look at our soils. At spring of the year, you can have snow and you'll have crocuses poking through the snow. Fall of the year, there's still things growing even though it's froze several times. And I tell people we're not taking advantage of it. Most of the cash crops that are growing today are really only cycling sunlight for 90 days, 100 days, that's about it. So that you're only taking, you know, a quarter of the sunshine that's available and pumping it into the soil through photosynthesis. You need to grow things for a much, much longer period of time. It's not uncommon at all for us to have green growing plants up till Thanksgiving. You know, that's not uncommon at all. And as soil health advances, you're going to be able to grow things even longer. So we're extending the growing season. Works really well. Then you find out, and they're just learning about this, which of these cover crops will pump more carbon into the soil. So this is 2 species of mycorrhizal fungi up here. Here we have a flax plant and a sorghum plant. Flax plant, sorghum plant. What they're finding is flax is only pumping about 30% of the carbon that it's producing into the soil, whereas the sorghum plant's pumping 70% into the soil. Here's 71%. So there's species we can grow that'll actually add to that carbon bank account in the soil. That's why on our operation we really like sorghum sudan grass. Now it's a warm season and obviously we're in a cool season environment, so there's only a certain window that you can grow that, but why not? If you're focusing on soil health, improving your soil, why not? I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. It all begins with more photosynthesis. The more photosynthesis, the more you're going to advance the healthier soil. Now, cover crops. I like to think of them as biological primers. use cover crops to address your resource concern. So many times I hear people, oh, I tried a cover crop and it failed. Well, I'm willing to bet the cover crop didn't fail. Did you address your resource concern first? I often get calls where people, I'll give you an example. I had a call just this last spring, producer from South Dakota. He said, Gabe, I have irrigated land, I grew winter wheat, combined off the winter wheat, we baled the straw, I seeded radishes and turnips, and then put the cows on there, and this was in March. He called me, and I said, let me guess, before he even finished, you got bare soil, right? Yeah, my fields are blown away. I says, well, think of what you did. You took off your winter wheat cash grain, there goes a third the carbon in the grain. You baled off all the straw, right? So there goes the rest of the carbon. You added turnips and radishes, which will accumulate and cycle nitrogen. You grazed off the biomass. The minute that tuber started breaking down, it released that nitrogen. There went what little residue you had left, and you got bare soil. I said you grew exactly the wrong cover crop for your resource concern. Oh, gee, he says, I didn't think of that. I just bought cover crop seed. Yeah, you have to decide what are you trying to do on that particular field. Do you want to increase the organic matter? Do you want to improve infiltration? Do you want to improve nutrient cycling? Are you trying to grow feed for livestock? Are you trying to attract pollinators? What is it you're trying to do on that particular field? Then you design your cover crop mix accordingly. Rarely do cover crops fail. Obviously, we get into a drought situation, etc., okay. But it's rarely the cover crop. It's most often we did not plant the cover crop that addressed our resource concern. And there's getting to be a lot of good information out there. SARE has a bunch on their website. They have a book, Farming Cover Crops Profitably, that's available free for download on their website. Encourage you to look at that. There is some real knowledgeable cover crop seed salesmen around. When you call a cover crop seed dealer, they should ask you your name, your location, and then what's your resource concern. If they don't ask you that, get rid of them and find somebody that does, because they don't have your best interest at heart. You know, it's not about selling seed to you. You need to use what's going to work best to address your resource concerns. So be wary of that as you move forward. There's 32,000 tons approximately of nitrogen above every acre of land. Why in the world would any producer want to write a check for synthetic nitrogen? That just boggles my mind. All we have to do is seed legumes, have them inoculated with rhizobia, and we can cycle nitrogen. There's no reason to use any synthetic nitrogen. Here's what my organic matter levels have increased from 1.7 to 1.9 to 6.3 to 6.9, and they continue to go up. Now they're going to fluctuate a little bit. I'm not going to say they don't remain constant. If you're doing a really good job with covers, I see them advance about 0.2% per year. 0.2 is pretty common. Some people claim they can do a lot more than that. 0.2 is about what you'd expect. What's that worth, organic matter? If you figure a furrow slice is 2 million pounds, 6 inches, that's a furrow slice. Figure out the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and I added sulfur on there. For every 1% organic matter, you got about $730 worth of those nutrients. Get your organic matter up to 5%, that's $3,600 worth of nutrients. That's how nature functions. Let's use it to our advantage. Fifth principle, integrating animals and insects. This is an overview of part of our ranch. The light blue areas are cropland. The light green areas were once cropland and are now seeded back to perennials. Everything else in yellow is native perennial pasture. Everything, all the yellow lines are a permanent fence. And what I'm trying to get across to you here is integrate everything. We try and get animals on our cropland acres every year and integrate them. What you don't see in this photo is There's 170 homes right here now. This is being developed here now, and there's a bunch of homes right here now. So it's not real easy, because we're not contiguous, to get cattle back and forth. So the cow herd stays primarily in these two areas, and then all the yearlings and finishers are down on here, and we can rotate them. And we use the power of stock density. And I don't care what you call it. I prefer to call it adaptive planned grazing. But if you call it mob grazing, high stock density grazing, big grazing, whatever, the important thing is you have a plan and you use livestock as a tool. We're not always running right here. That's about 700,000 pounds live weight per acre. We're not always at that rate. Oftentimes we're a lot less than that. You use them as a tool to address your resource concerns. And we integrate them by grazing covers, because livestock are a way to convert cover crops into dollars. So we do that. Here we're grass finishing on there. I mentioned how I like brown midrib sorghum Sudan, and you'll notice this mix is really dominant in that sorghum Sudan. To finish, grass finish, and get the amount of fat, that healthy fat that we want on our animals, we will have them graze the last 60 days of, how do I put this? We're grass finishing throughout the entire year. We're harvesting animals every 3 weeks. However, we're going to harvest potloads of animals in October, coming off of 60 days on this mix. And I'll show you some figures coming up for that. That allows us to do several things. One, they're priming the carbon pump. When an animal grazes a living plant, that plant sends a signal, hey, I've been injured, I got to slough roots, pump more carbon out so I can attract biology and regrow. So we can accelerate the advancement of soil health by using grazing animals. So that's why one reason we want to do that. The other thing is, just what I showed you, we can pump more carbon with some of those species into the soil. Here's what it looks like before it's grazed. Then the cattle are on it. Notice we're not making them eat everything. We got to leave that armor. Plus, these are finishing cattle. We want them to be able to select for energy and put the maximum amount of weight on it that they can. That's what it looks like trampled then. See, they're only taking about 25% of the above ground biomass. They're leaving plenty of armor. Post-frost, still green and growing. Here's what I wanted to show you. This was last year. We ran 107 head of finishers on there. We averaged 4.05 pounds a day gain on it. We can consistently average 3.5 to 4 pounds a day gain on those warm season mixes. Warm season grasses like sorghum Sudan, they're a C4 grass, meaning they have that extra carbon molecule. They're going to be higher in energy. Animals will select for energy. Now, we do that with some of the covers, and then some of them we'll let go. This photo here, it's probably froze 20 times already, but notice the kale and the collards and that are still green and growing. The sorghum Sudan grass here is already, frost kills it. It gets down to 32, it's gone, but it holds its nutrients pretty well. So we will graze cow-calf pairs on it through the winter, and we're only moving them about once or twice a week. North Dakota State University did some good research. They tested these forages in August and then again in late November after it had froze many times. Radish is still 14% crude protein, 70% TDN in early winter. Hairy vetch, which I really like, still 18% crude protein in late November, 70% TDN. That's going to balance any of the protein needs for those livestock. When it's growing, hairy vetch will be 25 to 30% crude protein. It's absolutely amazing. Millet falls off really fast after a frost, so we don't put much millet in any of the mixes we're going to graze during the winter. Sorghum Sudan holds its nutrient content real well, especially the brown midribs. Allow your livestock to do what they do best. We don't provide our livestock with a bed and breakfast. Those animals evolved over time to graze. They want to be out grazing. Now, last winter, we had 100 inches of snow by the first week of January. We had to start bale grazing in December. There was just no way around it. They physically couldn't get through the snow to get to grazing. So then we bale graze. And bale grazing, if you're familiar with it, it's placing your bales out and then allowing the animals access to them. And we'll allow our animals access to about a week to 10 days worth at a time and then move the hot wire. Most winters, we're able to start a tractor once to feed all of our beef cattle through the winter. That's the day we set the bales out in the fall, because I'll be doing that here next week when I get home from Oklahoma. I'll be setting the bales out, and then we don't start bale grazing most years till into February. Sometime in February will be the first we feed any hay. Let the animals, they got 4 legs, let them walk out there and graze. We do not like to bale graze on cropland. It just leaves too much residue there. We like to bale graze on our perennial pastures that were once cropland. I don't want to do it on native pasture because I don't want to introduce some species I may not want to on there. So this is spring of the year, right after we bale grazed. And you can see I get a lot of people, oh man, what are you going to do with that? You got to harrow it, you got to do something there. No, I don't, because in a matter of months it'll look like that. Yes?
Why have cattlemen lost cows in rough weather in Dakotas?
Why have they lost animals? First of all, if there's not enough protection, the wind will get them, and that's a problem we have. You know, it's open, there's no protection. You can see that's my place. You know, I tell people, yeah, I have 2 trees, 2 pastures with a tree, is it. There's just not much protection. But they'll get drifting and then they'll pile into a gully or something or a water source, and that's why they'll lose them there. So that's one of the reasons we leave our calves on the cows the entire winter. The heifer calves are learning how to become cows in our environment, because those cows know when a storm's coming. We have the gates open where they can get behind some shelter and they'll trail back to the shelter in the winter. But this is carbon. People say, oh, look at all that hay, that's a waste. No, it isn't. It's carbon that's going to cycle through. Now, NRCS did some good studies on one of my fields here after the year following bale grazing. We tripled forage production in the paddocks where we bale graze. And it'll be a multiple year effect. So what I have, this is my home place there behind the trees. We'll bale graze in a different paddock every winter. And after about 12 years, we'll be back to where we started and go again. And the effect won't last 12 years, but it'll last several years. It improves the soil. Okay, I got to wrap it up. So here's our soil building since we've started. When I started in '93, low organic matter, monoculture grain production, not integrating the animals onto cropland. We started to diversify the cash crops. We saw a step up in organic matter. We started adding some cover crops, another step up in organic matter. Then when we started growing the multi-species covers and remove the synthetic fertilizer about this time, big uptick in organic matter, in the health of our soil. Then we started integrating the livestock, higher stock densities, grazing on cropland, another uptick in organic matter. And we actually, and I mentioned this, we have a plot of land now that is up to 11.1% organic matter. And not that organic matter is the end all, but it's just a barometer we're using as to soil health. And I talked to the soil scientist that was on our place last week doing the soil testing. That's what 11% organic matter soil looks like. And he says we have well aggregated soils 4 feet deep now. And he said the A horizon is over 20 inches.
Wow.
In most of our cropland fields now. And when we started, the A horizon was 3 inches. So you can change this over time. One's ability to be successful with regenerative agriculture is directly related to one's understanding of how soil ecosystems function. Not just soil, but water, etc. It's all about a healthy ecosystem. That's what it's about.
If you're down though, if you're really worn out and you're in dry country, it doesn't work that easy.
Well, this is 20 years, you know.
No.
This is 20 years, and my soils, I showed you what they were. I would compare those soils 20 years ago to any soils here. It's going to be about the same. You know, in fact, you have a little newer soils than us because we were settled a little earlier than you were out here. So it should be easier for you out here. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm certainly saying it can be done. It can be done anywhere. And I'm confident of that, and we've seen it done anywhere. There's virtually no place. We've had visitors now on our ranch in the last 5 years from all 50 states, every Canadian province, and 22 foreign countries. And it's working in all those. So it can be done. Yes, questions?
Are you finding that a lot of these land grant universities are starting to teach this method?
Are land grant universities teaching this? Unfortunately, no. And it comes down to how are they funded. And the thing is, we're making progress though. I have 3 universities in North Dakota now that bus their students to our ranch one day every year and at least expose their students to it. So that's a good thing. You know, it's a good thing. But are they teaching it? No. But this summer I hosted all the extension agents from North Dakota on our ranch for a day and showed them soil health and we had a good discussion. So it's getting out there. This is a movement that's picking up steam, and for some of us who have been in it a long time, it's been a long, long haul, but now, I mean, we just see it. You can't hardly pick up a farm publication anymore without it talking about soil health. So that's a good thing. Yes?
Are there any like apprentice programs or teaching farms for young people to learn how to do this?
Are there any apprentice programs? What time is the young...
We got about 10 minutes. We could talk all day with these questions, and I'd love to, but we have 10 minutes to the next class starts, or next session, I believe. So as long as you want to skip your bathroom break, we'll keep answering questions.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm involved with, my 3 partners, Ray Archuleta, Dr. Alan Williams, David Brandt, myself, we started a group called Soil Health Consulting LLC. As a part of that, we have a nonprofit we're starting called Soil Health Academy, where we put on 3-day intensive schools just teaching ecosystem function. We're working with several groups now that are looking to sponsor young people to attend our courses. So keep the fingers crossed. Hopefully by early next year, we'll be able to offer some scholarships to young people to attend those courses. And they're 3 days of intensive instruction. Yes?
How do you go about improving diversity in your perennial pastures?
How do I improve diversity in perennial pastures? That's a great question. I do not interseed anything if it's true native pasture that has not been tilled. Okay? That can be done simply with animal impact and recovery time. You have to go in there with high stock density grazing, mimic what the buffalo and elk did centuries ago, and then long recovery periods. Ray Bannister, if you've ever heard of Ray, out at Webo, Montana, if you ever have the opportunity to visit Ray's place, you know, he's in an 8 to 10 inch moisture environment. I see prairie there that mimics tall grass prairie. It's absolutely phenomenal. And he's done it with what he calls his boom bust. High stock density, then 22 months recovery time.
So how about with tame pastures?
Tame pastures you can go in and interseed and then use animal impact.
What are you interseeding?
Yeah, and that's going to vary from place to place. What I like, Sicer milk vetch. I like some of the grazing alfalfas, ladino clover, chicory, plantain, and then native grasses. Green needle, needle and thread, big blue, Indian grass, switchgrass work on my place. Western wheat. Yeah, that's what we're interseeding.
And are you using any chemicals to burn that down?
I am not, but it would be easier for the species to get started if you did. You know, it's often said, people are afraid, oh, I'm going to go bankrupt if I try this. Why? how you're gonna make more money doing this. So, but it's just fear of the unknown. And what I tell them is just grow things. Here's what I tell people. Take one field, whatever scale you're on, whether it's 1/10 of an acre or 1,000 acres. Some people do it on a field way behind where none of the neighbors will see. I'll do it right by the interstate because I want everybody to see, and then commit yourself 5 years. Say, I'm going to no-till that field for 5 years. I'm going to try diversity. I'm going to try covers. I have never, ever had anyone go 5 years and then go back. I've had them drop out after a couple of years, but I've never had them go all 5 and then go back to the way they were doing things. So you've got to make the commitment. And a lot of people just don't have it in them to do that. I can't help that, When there's an old adage that goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yes.
And that's the way it is. They have to be ready. And my goal is to get you ready before you have a disaster like I did with the 4 years of drought and hail. I'd rather you start taking steps now than go through some financial disaster. Yes, John?
Do you do any composting?
Do I do any composting? Yes, and it's small scale because we don't have animals in confinement. But because I'm seeding cover crops, I got those bags. Or I used to be in the bull business, so I get all these bull catalogs. They work great for composting, things like that. So we will make compost, and I use that compost where we plant our vegetables.
And so do you spread that as compost, or do you make an extract?
Yeah, that's spread as compost. I use a 2-year static process. The first year we're adding things to it. Second year it's just a static pile. And then I go out to my native prairie and I bring home bucketfuls of soil and I actually place it in that compost to proliferate my biology.
Oh, wow.
And that's what we're doing.
Okay, we're gonna absolutely have to wrap up. This could be a 2-hour session, but they're gonna come through that door and wanna chop my head off. So we'll have to wrap up, but Gabe, could
Okay.
you give us 3 takeaways that we could write down in concrete, go home and say, we need to do this in a drought or higher drought?
Yeah. The first one without a doubt is grow things as long as possible throughout the year. Second thing is focus on mycorrhizal fungi. So reduce your tillage, reduce your synthetics a little bit. Third thing, if you're a conventional producer, use the Haney soils test to determine how much biology you have and start weaning yourself off synthetics. The Haney soil test is the best test out there to get you moving in the right direction. Realize that the conventional soil tests are just a waste of time. They're not telling you anything.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up. Go to the bathroom real quick, come right back.
Thank you.